Please welcome Professor Ali Chrysler, Director of Undergraduate Programs in the Department of Health Studies, College of Arts and Sciences at AU.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Ali Chrysler, Director of the Undergraduate Program in the Department of Health Studies in the College of Arts and Sciences, and actually a fellow at the Vlorick Center for Entrepreneurship in the Kogod School of Business. It's wonderful to see so many students and faculty, colleagues, and friends filling this room. And to those joining us via live stream, welcome to you as well. So today's event is part of the Alan Meltzer CEO Speaker Series, a program that brings exceptional business leaders to campus to share their experience, their wisdom, and frankly, their candor with the community. The series reflects something we believe deeply here at American University, that the most valuable learning happens when students sit across from people who are actually doing the work. What makes today's conversation very exciting is that it's happening here at American University, of course, where we're actively modeling what cross-disciplinary collaboration looks like in practice. From Kogod's expertise in business and analytics to the scientific and health foundations of the College of Arts and Sciences, we're building something quite rare, a culture of inquiry that doesn't stop at college boundaries. When a student who understands public health sits alongside one who understands market forces, the ideas that emerge are fundamentally better. This is exactly the momentum that a challenge as complex as AI in healthcare demands. And that momentum starts with opportunity. So the launch of AU's Business Analytics and AI minor is worth celebrating, and it's an opportunity that extends well beyond Kogod students. If you are studying public health, and I see some public health students in the audience, what we know is that engaging seriously with AI is now one of the most forward-looking investments you can make in your future. For those on the pre-med path or those studying chemistry, maybe you're a bio major, entering medical school fluent in AI and its clinical application means arriving better prepared, not just for the classroom, but for residency, where these tools are already shaping how care is being delivered. The next generation of healthcare leaders will not simply understand medicine. They will understand medicine and what technology can and cannot do within it. So, which brings us to why we're all here today. AI is no longer a future-facing concept in healthcare. It's here, it's accelerating, and it's reshaping how care is delivered, how decisions are made, and who gets access to what. Our conversation will explore both the promise and the real tensions that come within that transformation. So we're so fortunate to have three of the most thoughtful leaders in this space with us today. Paul Diaz is a managing partner at Cressey Company, where he leads healthcare investment partnerships. And notably, he is a Kogod alum. Paul previously served as president and CEO of both Myriad Genetics and Kindred Healthcare, a Fortune 500 provider, and has earned wide recognition for his leadership across healthcare and biotech. Paul brings to today's conversation the dual lens of someone who has run major healthcare organizations and now deploys capital to shape where the industry goes next. Dan Mendelsohn is the CEO of Morgan Health, a business unit of JPMorgan Chase, focused on improving the quality, affordability, and equity of employer-based healthcare, a system that covers tens of millions of Americans. Before Morgan Health, Dan founded and led Avalier Health, served as the operating partner at Welsh Carson, and held senior health policy roles in the White House Office of Management and Budget. Dan has spent his career at the intersection of policy, markets, and systems change. And he has a lot to say about what AI can actually do for everyday patients navigating a fragmented system. Dr. Adaeze Enekwechi is the CEO of Nadia Care, a venture-backed company reimagining maternal health, and is also an operating partner on the healthcare team at Welsh Carson. Dr. Enekwechi, also an alum of AU, previously served as president of Impact and a managing director of Optum, leading large-scaled Medicare and Medicaid initiatives. She has held senior federal policy roles at the Congressional Budget Office, MedPAC, and the White House Office of Management and Budget under President Obama. She serves on the boards of MedStar Health and Liberty Dental Plans. Dr. Enekwechi brings a perspective that is rare, deeply grounded in both policy and operations, and relentlessly focuses on patients who are too often left out of the conversation. Moderating our conversation is someone you all know very well, Dave Marchick, Dean of the Kogod School of Business. Since becoming Dean in 2022, Dave has made AI one of Kogod's signature areas of focus, and today he'll be putting that curiosity to work. Dave brings to this role a career spanning the Carlyle Group, the U.S. Development Finance Corporation, Covington, and the Clinton administration. And he is, as you will see, someone who doesn't just ask about AI in the abstract. Please join me in welcoming our panelists and our moderator. I can think of no better group to have this conversation with today.
What a wonderful, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. What a wonderful introduction, Professor. Thank you so much. And we love the collaboration with you. I see Professor White back there from the Valoric Center. Because basically life is not stovepiped. You need all these skills. So thank you all for coming as well. I want to dive straight into kind of the opposite of the incredible bios that you have, which is, I always tell students, just make it up, okay? And you all are very successful CEOs, but without insulting you, none of you really had any qualifications to do what you're doing. So let me just start, like Dan, you went to college and you studied viola. In an email I said he was an oboe player, and I got a quick, harsh response because I guess I got into that oboe-viola rivalry. But so, Paul, you have a business degree but a law degree, and Adaeze, you were a history and public finance. So, how did you get into this, and what gave you the confidence to just make? Dan, let's start with you. You started a company and you sold for $140 million, okay? And you basically had no business background. So how did you have all of you, how did you have the confidence to pivot into being successful leaders?
All right, so I did start as a viola major at a conservatory of music, Oberlin, and loved those years. And look, you spend 6 hours a day in a practice room, and there's a certain relentlessness that I think you have to have to make that work. After I graduated, I went out and made my living as a musician for a number of years, and then it kind of dawned on me that that was not what was going to make me happy in the long term. What part of it was that the best viola player in the orchestra is doing exactly what the conductor is telling him or her to do, and this is not my personality at all. So it took me probably 22 years to figure that out. And but when I figured it out, I immediately knew that I had to make a pivot, and so I went back to school and retrained. And look, I think that the piece for me that has been a guiding principle is to do things that I feel really passionately about, and to really focus in areas that I think I can make a difference. And healthcare is a great field. I mean, it touches all of us. It touches our families. It's the most important thing. And to be able to grow a career in that, to me, kind of healthcare and public health together, it's so important, and it's such a an area that is rife with problems, so it really makes a lot of sense to do. Look, I think we all learn things as we progress in our lives, and when I went back to school, it was to do a public policy degree and studied management there and worked as a consultant for 8 years before going back into the government. So the careers accrete, and what you do in one place then helps you to accomplish the next thing. And by the time I sold that company, I had sold many companies, and so it wasn't a novel exercise for me.
Okay, so you're not offended that I said you were unqualified, but okay.
Not at all. I think it's really helpful, actually, because you think about a career and it does kind of happen. It happens, but it happens because you direct it to happen, and you have a lot of agency as you go through to make that next decision of where you want to go.
Paul?
You want me to build on that? I think getting up every morning and doing something you're passionate about is critical, because you can't lead, because people see through that. So I would definitely echo Dan's comments. It is also a function of just leaning into things accidentally, as you like to talk about, Dave, that if you see an opportunity, seize it. I mean, one of the great things about our society here is the right to fail and get back up and try again. That does not happen in a lot of places in the world. And so, when I was here as a student, sitting here now and just sort of reflecting, I can't believe I'm sitting here with you, quite frankly, because like many of you, like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to get a job? And my first job out of here was with Anderson, because they were hiring accountants. And I'm like, I don't want to be an accountant, but $19,600. I still have the letter from John Schroeder. And I thought that was all the money in the world. And I had a lot of student loans. But you do accumulate skills. You do accumulate capabilities. And I think that along the way, I've leveraged the things I learned here at Kogod. I've leveraged the things I learned at Georgetown Law. But ultimately, it is about seeing opportunities and leaning into it with other like-minded people, and having fun as you do it, and not being afraid to, if it's not working, changing direction, because we've all done that, I think, at some point.
Okay, you grew up in Nigeria and Iowa, which is not a typical combination, and you studied history. When you were in college, did you think you were going to be a top White House aide and a CEO of a healthcare company or multiple healthcare companies?
I didn't know you were going to start here, Dave, but...
Well, we prepared a lot, but I just kind of make things up.
It helps to maybe add a bit more context to the setup. I'm a product of academic parents. And so when your parents are college professors and are well-educated, the instruction, and also I'm Nigerian, it's a hyper competitive, very education-driven and achievement-driven culture. So I was supposed to end up wherever I was meant to be, and the instruction, my dad used to say this all the time, is wherever you end up, whatever room, and I didn't know what, that was 12, whatever room you end up in the world, pull up a seat at the table and sit there. And it was almost daily. And if you're Nigerian, you're supposed to get a doctorate in anything, just get it. And so, and so it was just assumed, which is a pretty important differentiator, I think, relative to how some others grow up. I did not know where I was going to be, but I will tell you that when I finished undergrad at Iowa, I was an African-American history and African studies major. I knew I wasn't going to work with it because you couldn't really be employed, really, in my mind. So I knew I was coming to get a policy degree in DC. And I got my policy degree here. My MPP was from, I don't know what's called.
School of Public Affairs.
Ward Circle, exactly.
Great
Circle
school.
Building. Great school. And did very well and got a job at a very prestigious organization, the only one in my class to get a job at the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. Tiny agency, 230 people. I don't think it's grown, frankly. And I fully prepared to retire at CBO. That was the plan. I had hit the gold mine. If you're a policy person, and of course did not that did not quite work out. So life, as Paul was saying, takes you in different directions. I got married, and they make you move, the husbands. Like, if you have to move, if he has plans to do stuff. So I ended up moving. I needed to do something, and I had to get a PhD at that point. So, it's just, it was very meandering. I will say, education and your work experience do accumulate over time. I was probably always interested in business, despite not necessarily going in that direction. When I finished graduate school, I could go to Citibank or CBO, and I chose CBO. I ran away from healthcare. I did not specialize in healthcare here. I was focused on public finance because e-commerce was new, and we should figure out how to create a tax structure in this new medium. So I found myself in healthcare later, and frankly, there was not one bit of my education or experience that was wasted. They all mattered.
Okay, great. And I put myself in the category of, I have a history, a policy, and a law degree, never studied business, no PhD, and I'm dean of a business school. So kind of we're all making stuff up. But okay, let's start with, and a lot of people at my school say I'm not really qualified to, but let's start with, just tell us in 30 or 45 seconds what your organization does. Let's starting with you.
Yeah. Nadia Care, and we just rebranded to Nadia Care. It's a venture-backed maternal health company. We provide wraparound services to pregnant and postpartum women to support them through this journey, this, what can often be a very difficult journey, with social supports, lactation consultants, registered nutritionists, anything that basically threatens your chances of having a successful pregnancy or postpartum period. We focus on Medicaid insured moms because they are often the most vulnerable.
Got it. Okay, Paul.
So I'm at an investment firm called Cressey Company. We are a healthcare-only investor, and we typically invest in sort of that second stage of growth after a great venture-backed company gets off, and the business model is proven. So we are, a lot of people don't really appreciate private equity, but private equity isn't where all the dark lords hide. We actually build companies that do important things, and we put quality as one of the critical things. If we are not solving to a problem in the healthcare system, and we don't feel like we have a management team that is focused on solving the problem, we won't invest in that company, because that's ultimately, I think, how we get good returns for our investors. So we focus on healthcare information technology. We focus on services providers, a range of those. And right now, some of the things that we're most excited about is some virtual care models. We have a company called Heartbeat, which is a virtual cardiology company that's really meeting the shortfall of cardiologists. And a company that does maternal health and women's health as well. That's another underserved area. And so we have a lot of fun. We love building and scaling teams, and
the check size you write and your kind of target returns are what?
Yeah. So we have I guess we should throw some money in here. $3 billion under management. Our check sizes can vary from a placeholder of 30 million to usually we target like 150 million is kind of our sweet spot of a check size.
And you're trying to double or triple?
Yeah, we've got to be good stewards of our investor dollars, but we're targeting 2 to 3 times the money, and we've had top quartile returns for the last 20 years since Brian Cressey founded the firm. So
okay. And Dan, what does Morgan Health do?
So Morgan Health is a business unit of JPMorgan Chase with a mission of improving employer-sponsored healthcare. We focus on improving quality, improving affordability, and improving the equity of care. So we're double bottom line investors, which means that every time we write a check, we're thinking about a non-financial performance indicator, which might be better diabetes care, more cancer screening, better use of digital analytics. And then we're also stewards of the bottom line because we're investing off the balance sheet, and it's a profitable function for the bank. Then, in addition, the bank employs about 350,000 people in the United States and runs a very robust healthcare benefits program, and that enables us to be a learning laboratory. So we work with a lot of our portfolio companies. We have 13 companies that we've invested in since starting the group 5 years ago. And about half of them, we work with them. And that enables us to give them some very tough love, because if you're sitting on the board of a company and they're not doing exactly what you want them to do, you can go and say, what the hell? And that's something that we do very routinely with our portfolio companies. And then the last aspect of what we do is engage in policy. So it's not enough to invest in the companies and to use it internally. There are some problems that we can't solve by ourselves and really requires policy engagement. And so that's another facet of our activity.
Okay, so let's table set in the room. So how many of you in the room use AI weekly? Okay, how about daily? Okay, how many of you hate the healthcare system and are frustrated by it? Okay. How many of you, when you go to the doctor's office, enjoy filling out those forms and having your doctor not even look at you when they talk to you and just being on a computer typing? Do people like that? How many of you like that? Okay. So we're going to get into this. Let's start with a futuristic vision, and then let's go to trust, because they're bookends of this. Okay, so Dan, you just wrote an article for Forbes, right? Or Fortune, Forbes, which basically laid out a future of healthcare with AI avatars taking information, of more efficient allocation of resources, of pharmaceuticals being developed at a faster pace. Just lay out kind of the most optimistic vision of the future of healthcare with AI in it.
Maybe I'll take a slightly different tack on it, and because I love your questions, and sometimes I just choose not to answer them, because people do that.
We're close friends, and he gets annoyed by my questions.
No,
but anyway.
not at all. I'm not in the least. No, it's actually the first tenet of media training, which is answer the question you want to answer, not the question you were just asked. And no one will remember, because if you just start talking, as opposed to what I did, which is explain what I'm doing. But in any case, we are at,
All right, get to the question. All right, let's.
Yeah, okay. Let's first think a little bit about how AI is being used today. Passive listening becoming very common in doctors' offices, in hospitals as well. Administrative simplification, very important. A lot of the routine tasks are starting to be automated through the use of AI. A lot of use of AI in medical imaging right now. It's I think more common than not that breast images are being screened by, if not read by AI. Cardiac CT, other types of images like that, very, very common use of AI. And then some places where AI has failed to reach promise, we don't have capable AI therapists. That's a slightly hot take in some ways, because I think somebody could argue with me. We do not have capable AI primary care physicians at this point. So a lot of the work that's going on right now is to start to introduce some of these tools in to help make clinicians more effective and efficient, but maybe not replace them outright. So it's a place to start.
Okay. Anybody else, any of you, before we get to trust, do you want to lay out kind of the most utopian vision of how AI can change healthcare for the better?
I'll leave that one to you.
Or you can ignore my question like Dan did.
It's a good question. And we're starting to scrape, I think. Healthcare tends to be last, if you will, when it comes to adopting new technology. Finance will lead, and you'll see, other industries. So in healthcare, natural language processing, which is the digestion of reams of data, structured, unstructured, qualitative, quantitative, we're starting to see that pick up more. We were doing this some years ago. We just weren't calling it AI, right? If you're in biostats or computational math, like, you would have been doing this work, or at least been aware of it. It's starting to, I think, accelerate to some degree in healthcare. When it comes to making appointments, We're starting to see much more of that be done, not just done, but done well, where there's less abrasion between the individual and how they feel about the interaction. So I think you see some refinements, and I think that's going to get better. I will also say that when it comes to ambient listening, Dan alluded to this earlier, but let me just expand on that. When you are on the healthcare services side, there is great utility and efficiency to be gained in reducing the burden on the provider's documentation requirements, right? In healthcare, we love to document, both for payment accuracy, payment integrity, regulations, et cetera. You need to prove to someone that you've done what you said you would do. And to prove that, you need to document pretty extensively. That documentation accounts for about 30% of, just administrative expense. That provider could be doing much more and could be better focused. Again, you alluded to this, Dave. If there is some tool to basically do the note-taking, document efficiently using whether it's Athena, whatever app, whatever mechanism you're using, we are starting to see that accelerate pretty significantly in healthcare. So those are the 3 key points.
Let me just expand on this before Paul. So just imagine going to the doctor, having AI listen, create your medical records, send your prescription to the pharmacy, tell the pharmacy by the time you get home, have it delivered, share the same record with all of your doctors. You all are very young in here, but I have a cardiologist, I have a pulmonologist, we have a lot of doctors as you get old. And it's annoying when you go to the doctor and they say, okay, you need this medicine, and then they don't give it to the pharmacy, and you have to call, you have to wait on hold. It's horrific. So, okay, Paul.
So I'm gonna answer your question.
Okay.
Let's up level
Thank you.
this for a second, okay? So we all know, let's up level for a second. We have a healthcare system that is not working. There's not access. There's not quality and good service. People don't feel good about the healthcare we're delivering, and we have a cost problem. So an unsustainable issue in terms of access, quality, and cost. My colleagues mentioned a lot of the tactical things that AI can do, but when you start with the patient journey, as was described in some of these examples, and the interface with the provider, and diagnosis, treatment decisions, and then elevating science more quickly. We'll talk about that a little bit later in terms of what this is doing to advance new clinical opportunities. There is a huge opportunity here, and that's why we're hitting or talking about it. But as has been said too, healthcare is very fractured. It is, significantly government run, not always in the best interest of patients or the system. And it is very hard to get things done in healthcare. And margins are very tight in healthcare. Notwithstanding the pharmaceutical companies. So I do believe that there is a shared view that over time, AI can be a big driver of changing that paradigm around access, quality, and reducing the cost, because the cost burden right now is unsustainable. Everyone is seeing it. Everyone is seeing, 7 to 10% increases every year. We just can't, and we can't keep shifting that to employees or, to the government programs. So,
okay, so let's go to trust. Okay, just imagine the future where before you go to the doctor and you fill out the same forms like 17 times, there's an AI avatar that you give all your information to. So here's what's going on. Here are my symptoms. The AI avatar asks you all kinds of questions. Digest that, and then when you go into the doctor's office, the doctor has all the information, okay? Or you have surgery that's done by a robot or with AI. So healthcare, there's an inherent issue of trust more than almost any other. Do I trust that the most personal information about me is out there? Do I trust a machine to make sure that it's my right leg and not my left leg that they're operating on? So how do you approach this issue of trust? And we all kind of are confident about AI, but the average person says, God, AI's going to wreck the world or eliminate my job? And so how do you balance progress with trust? Who wants to start with that besides Dan, because he disqualified himself from answering questions for the first.
Well, I'll start. And I mentioned the population we serve. Again, pregnant moms, postpartum, Medicaid. And if you understand that population, I think you will have an appreciation for what we talk about when we talk about healthcare disparities. The country is doing pretty poorly on maternal health, regardless of the subgroup you're talking about. We're actually the worst performer among industrialized nations. And if you understand, I'll just pick a state, in the state of Nevada, so a state that you may not think about when you think about some of the worst disparities, and more than half of the women in that state don't go to a single prenatal visit before the baby is born. You wouldn't expect, if you knew that that was a possibility in the United States, you probably wouldn't pick that state. You might pick some other southeastern states, right, where we have some pretty abysmal outcomes. But it's not uncommon. And so when you dig deeper and you ask women why, it's fundamental, it's almost primal. People don't believe that when they interact with actors in the healthcare system, that you have their best interest at heart. And that is not something most of us who are advantaged or have grown up in certain geographies can even conceive of, right? And there's a great deal of humility that I think you need to sort of have as you approach these populations, because it's easy to judge them. It's easy to make judgments about, well, you should know better. You should go to your doctor's appointments. It's much more fundamental at times than, say, transportation challenges or housing, even though those are still pretty important factors that can drive reductions or poor access. All this to say, when AI is introduced to this dynamic where there is already no trust, forget broken trust, just doesn't exist. And you need to make sure that the human being who is interacting with that individual or that population at every single interval understands their experience. People don't trust because there's a whole history of harm that's been done in their community or judgment. And so they don't see that interaction as something that would be safe for them, and they're willing to take their chances. There's, I think that the importance of understanding where people are coming from, being very intentional about how you engage them. AI really has to be sort of in the background. It has to be more about what are we doing to do that and to have that interaction go as smoothly and as seamlessly as possible.
So I think it's going to be proving it. I think until we actually start adopting and people see the friction come out of the system and see their daily activities get better. So I think we're going to have to earn people's trust. Look, the context for it, if we've never had lower trust in our institutions than we have today, and that certainly extends to healthcare. But the most trusted person in healthcare is your nurse. Is the nurse that you talk to, because she or he listens to you. And so we have to create that level of personal trust. And the only way we're going to do that is through, years and years of earning that by, proving out these new models and these new workflows.
So I definitely agree that AI has the potential to drive better trust over time. If you look at who you trust the least, your insurance company right now, they're conflicted. They're going to deny your claim. You do not trust them. Like we measure at JPMorgan Net Promoter Score of different activities, and the Net Promoter Score of our health insurance program is negative. And by the way, it's a very generous program. Yet we're running a clinic in Columbus, Ohio, where we set up a primary care clinic within a large facility, and people come in and they engage, face-to-face with a nurse or a doctor in that clinic. We have a Net Promoter Score of 88. Now, we use AI on the back end to help get good answers for our patients in that clinic. And we have another example. We have a portfolio company called Time Care, which is a cancer services company. So when an individual is diagnosed with cancer, they will help that person navigate in the system, figure out where to get good care, figure out how to get more cost-effective care. If they're diagnosed in a major academic institution, they might find it a lot more convenient to get chemotherapy close to their home. And we have nurses in that company who help these patients navigate, and a huge AI backend that helps them make good decisions. So to the point of nurses, okay, are the ones delivering the care, but they could never do what they do if they didn't have kind of the AI backend. It's also a hugely profitable company because they're taking out a lot of administrative waste and helping the people who use their services find lower cost care.
And I'll just give one example too. It just made me think of it. Heartbeat, our virtual cardiology business, has an 85 net promoter score because people don't know that it's AI driven. In fact, what they know is a cardiologist is actually getting back to them in 36 hours with their primary care doctor, doing a random a view of their diagnostics or echo, and it is the experience that is driving the trust.
So one of the biggest problems is like, you go to the doctor, they can't figure it out. You go again, you go to a different doctor. I saw Cam somewhere here, who's a freshman, plays basketball. He had a kind of a hip. He went to like 10 different doctors. Nobody could figure it out. Finally, one figured it out. He got surgery, and he's on the. But are you seeing evidence that actually doctors plus AI are doing better diagnoses in your businesses, or?
Some early signs.
Okay. In cardiology, you're seeing that?
In cardiology and some other areas
And
too.
in mammograms, I think I saw a study that
Yeah.
I saw this, like there's 40 million mammograms. My sister had breast cancer. It's obviously
Oncology is a big one too.
oncology. So 40 million mammograms a year, 20% error rate. And that AI plus a physician improves it by about 30%. So that's a lot of.
I mean, I think it depends on the specialty in terms of medicine. So radiology for sure, oncology, musculoskeletal, hips and knees, where we spend gazillions of dollars. So there are definite areas where, you know, AI and better diagnostics is driving, you know, reductions in error rate, improvements in outcomes, speedier outcomes, because you're doing the right thing precisely for that, you know, that body part. So yeah,
Okay.
we see that.
We have a bunch of athletes and coaches in the room. We have Coach Jennings, who is like the Coach K of field hockey, Jackie Manuel, who won the NCAA tournament with North Carolina, is our assistant coach. So all of our athletes wear these kind of, I don't know what you call them, but they're monitoring, what do you call those? They're wearables. They're monitoring everything, okay? And actually, I used AI. I think if Sharon could put that up. I'm training for a bike race this summer, and I had AI create a plan, and then it fills out a spreadsheet, and then Perplexity just created this agentic AI tool which can program. So I created my own website, and I think it's up here. So this is, you just keep going. So it basically gives me what I'm supposed to do, where I'm ahead. So the greens, my wife and I were in the Bahamas a couple weeks ago, so that's the red. I was drinking and eating, and but this is incredible. And so where are you seeing the biggest advances, and how do you see kind of our personal health data being used by AI to improve our lives?
Yeah, so this is another great example. You know, it's funny. Last week, we were pitched by a really interesting, tiny little company that just focuses on the integration of data from your wearables into clinical medical records. So it's kind of a nice example because we were talking about like some of the bigger companies, but there are also a lot of small niche companies that are playing in these areas. And, you know, obviously, if you can get the information from that wearable over into a medical record, then it can enhance the clinician's ability. They know what your heart rate is, you know, in a much broader field of vision, as opposed to just taking your heart rate, you know, at that moment. The wearables are still coming up to where clinical grade measurement and diagnostics is, and Paul can probably talk more about that from some of his experience. But it's fair to say, like, you can't get really good blood pressure reads other than a blood pressure cuff at this point. It's not like your Apple Watch is going to tell you what your blood pressure is, but over time, perhaps. And then every implanted cardiovascular defibrillator also has a readout that can actually give very detailed data, but those data are not right now being integrated into the clinical medical record. But I think over the bigger picture vision over some period of time is that it's a much more fully integrated record.
I mean, the advances in science and medical technology coupled with AI to take these different products and the variation of performance that we have, the drug interaction issues. So many people struggle with the level of their medications, and the doctors are just sometimes making it up because they don't know, because they can't see you on a regular basis. But if on a regular basis your blood pressure is being monitored, your other vitals are being monitored, and that is being synthesized with other diagnostics, and AI is taking your history of that and looking at the medications you're on, and whether you're taking 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams, that can be a virtuous feedback loop right back to your doctor, and only he or she will change the order, though. They may get real-time science and diagnostics to enable them to make a change in the treatment. And that's kind of what we do with this cardiology company. They're doing real-time changes, and we've seen like an 80% drop in hospital admissions for heart failure and AFib.
All right, I'm going to just do speed rounds because I want to open it up. But all right, what aspect of your health? I'm going to just ask one of you each of these questions, okay? One of you. What aspect of your health would you never turn over or trust AI to help you with? Anybody?
Therapy.
Therapy, okay.
Therapy, yeah, behavioral health. I think it's the human. Disclaimer, my father is a psychologist, my brother's a psychiatrist. I'm surrounded by mental health professionals. There is just incredible complexity and nuance that's either situational, but also, particular to the individual, that I just have an appreciation for its complexity, but also the delivery and the how it can change. It's pretty dynamic over time. That, I think that a human being needs to be within the loop, yes.
Okay. Paul, what's the most exciting investment you've made recently that is going to be affected by AI?
I would say this heartbeat investment that I've mentioned.
What is that company does? How does it work?
It is a virtual cardiology business. We're having no trouble hiring cardiologists and full-time, part-time. They love working from home. And essentially they will do reads from home. And then within 36 hours, they'll get with the patient and the primary care physician and give a readout and a treatment plan.
So if someone goes and gets a echocardiogram or some other diagnostic.
Most primary care physicians do not know how to handle cardiology issues.
Okay.
And so you'll get an echo in their office, or you might have a patch at home, or a stress test or other things. And essentially, typically, it takes a long time for the primary care doc to get the feedback. And so we're doing real-time virtual, and AI is enabling a lot of that to happen. And again, take the variation of performance out of it. So we're just getting much better outcomes.
Okay, last question, then we'll open it up. Dan, Jamie Dimon and you are very, very focused on reducing the cost of healthcare because employers pay this extraordinary amount. It goes up 6, 7, 8% a year. What's the one area where your work is truly having a transformational impact on driving out costs in healthcare, it's just ridiculously expensive for everybody?
Yeah, not to be too serving of the topic here, but it is really the use of digital in healthcare. So we use digital analytics, AI, and other tools to be focusing on, for example, employee selection of a provider. So it's a great example where, what we do is we restructured our benefit so that if an employee chooses a low-cost, high-quality physician, they don't have to pay a copay. It's saving us probably 3 or 4% on cost right now in the geographies where we've deployed it. It's a choice that the employee makes just by giving them the information, which is all generated through the use of digital. We're able to drive costs down and ultimately improve quality as well.
I just want to give an advertisement for Professor Kelly Frias and Sonia Greer, 2 marketing professors. Their research shows that consumers just make terrible decisions about healthcare daily.
Yeah. And look, part of it is that we're not giving consumers the right information at the time that they need it, within their workflow. And, what we're finding is that consumers will make much better decisions when they trust information is being given to them that will actually improve their care and reduce their cost.
Okay. I could ask questions forever, but who wants to ask the first question? Just introduce yourself. What do you study or what do you do? And
should I stand up? My name is Ryan Betty. I'm a sophomore in finance. This question is for Paul specifically. I'm in the student managed investment fund here, so always thinking about investments. So my question was, which AI healthcare services are most attractive for PE firms, like what you're looking at and your capital? And then specifically to follow up to that, because that's a main topic of discussion for us in our fund, is do you think the valuations for these companies are being inflated at all and not representative of the actual fundamentals of the company?
Yes. That being said, some of these companies are posting spectacular revenue increases. So you really have to kind of parse through that. Look, we are really challenged right now for every partnership we have to make sure there is an AI strategy, because people are going to be either disintermediated or they're going to be the big winners depending on where they are. Data is going to play a big role in that. If they have a data moat that protects them and makes them unique in terms of the healthcare ecosystem. So we're not really leaning into AI investments per se, but what we are very excited about, and I think Dan and I share this, and we look at companies sometimes together, is where are the healthcare investments of the future that can be enabled by AI to really improve that triple aim that we talked about, and then generate really significant returns for investors. But it's very binary. I mean, the biggest problem we're having right now is developing the screen for, is this company, is this investment, this idea going to be a winner in AI, or is it going to be completely destroyed by AI? And we typically have an investment criteria that goes through a whole lot of other things, the TAM, the size of the market, the management team, what are the fundamentals of the business, where reimbursement policy going. By the way, in healthcare, for all your policy folks, everybody has to do policy in healthcare. It's just part of the job. We all have to lean into policy and be active in that conversation. So at the end of the day, it's become a real challenge to try to figure that out, because it's pretty early. There's just not enough data and information to make the decisions on who the winners and losers are, but we're trying to figure that out. I wouldn't invest the investment club in it.
Hello, I'm Victoria Zhao, and I study international relations and economics, and also pivoting into tech and business right now. So I just want to know, if you have any experience in alternative treatments in healthcare, and what does it look like right now, and has there been any changes since the emergence with AI technologies in the healthcare? Just how does the landscape look like right now?
What do you mean by alternative
Alternatives,
treatments?
things like, acupuncture, holistic health, herbal health, things like that. Mm-hmm.
From an investment perspective, I'm happy to, since I'm an operating partner in an investment firm. I mean, I think it's, investors are going to be leery about investing in any therapies that don't have evidence-based, like pure, like evidence base behind it. Now, I say that with a huge qualifier because in healthcare, so much does not have any evidence base behind it. But it's more comfortable to some extent when it's medical in nature. You have associations that can sort of speak to the credibility of the therapy. We're still very medical sort of oriented in the United States. So I think alternative therapies, again, CBD maybe, I think there's some investors that are definitely active in that space. But for traditional sort of healthcare investors, we're much more likely to default to usual, known, well understood, and sort of accepted, generally accepted therapies in medicine.
I'd add two things. Also, we generally tend to look at areas where there are reimbursement streams that come in through conventional channels like insurance, and often the holistic therapies are not reimbursed. But then there are some areas, so for example, we have a policy position around getting reimbursement for doula care. So instead of having a baby delivered by an OB, in many instances, you have evidence of better outcomes, more equity, more affordability by introducing medical professionals who are not trained as physicians. And so, there's a lot there. And I think that we really do need to be exploring a lot of these alternative pathways, particularly in rural areas. And actually, we haven't focused on rural areas. We've got a huge healthcare crisis in rural areas. And a lot of it is also being driven by the fact that you don't have a lot of medical professionals there. Yeah. So we have to be thinking much more broadly in those areas.
Which is where the virtual care really matters. But I think there's a great interest in wellness and all the things that can make that up. It's just very hard to invest behind. Okay. But your point on the medical society, to go back to the trust issue, it is both part of the thing that has been fractured here with the FDA and everything else, and at the same time, it is going to be an inhibitor to the adoption of AI, because the medical societies, along with government, are going to want to play in what we do and what we don't do, particularly in areas like oncology. And so that will be a guardrail, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the bad.
Okay.
Dr. Amita Kalachandran. I might be one of the few physicians here, but I trained in public health before medicine, and I did a fellowship in integrative medicine. Integrative medicine is basically evidence-based approaches of lifestyle, supplements, but again, the emphasis on evidence and science. So I'm the founder of a company called Evra Health, evrahealth.com. We launch in 3 weeks. We bring together your labs, your wearables, your medical record, put it all under the hood, and give you personalized, actionable insights that you can follow every day, because it's not just about a data dump. It's like, what do you do with that data to reach the goals that matter to you? We have a partnership with LabCorp. We have a partnership with Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drugs, again, to put everything under the hood, meal delivery. The one thing that is our number one value is access, right? So we can talk till the cows come home. I've worked for a number of different companies that all of us probably have heard of that are serving ultimately the 1% to 5%. The chronic disease epidemic is being driven by people that ultimately can't afford it. I've had great conversations on the Hill. Can you speak to the role of access and equity as it relates to AI and health? And I believe, I'm an AI optimist, obviously. I believe it can really help access, not AI doctors, but actually helping sort of in between the 363 days between doctor visits. Can you speak to that?
Well, like I said, I'll start. When it comes to rural, when it comes to people who can't get to the doctors, virtual care models enabled by AI is going to be a big opportunity for us.
And that's exactly what we're doing now. I think, and I appreciate hearing some of that background. A lot of that is very familiar. It's rural for sure, but even in large cities. I mean, we started our company in Philadelphia, which is sort of a mecca for medicine. And the surprise was how poor access truly was for a lot of women and families in that PA5, Delaware, New Jersey, tri-state area. we're not out of the woods in any particular geography. It's far more acute, right, in terms of access problems in rural areas. AI has a huge role to play in terms of extending the extenders. We don't use this term. It's not PC to use extenders. But when you think about navigators, who are sort of the anchor in our model, and other non-physician practitioners, we will never train enough physicians to address the access problems we have. Once we accept that as a thesis, we then have to think about other creative ways, which is other professionals you can bring into the fold, reduced time to credentialing them or training them, and then how does that AI or technology accelerate their reach and their productivity? Business, you have to be efficient. And of course, without any degradation in quality and outcomes as you sort of expand that reach. So huge work to do. Meal delivery. How often do you go to the wrong address? What's the quality of the food when you get there? It's so nitty gritty in terms of how you have to think about operations. You can get a lot wrong with AI if you're not asking the right questions. And so I think we didn't get to that here. Not enough time, but there's a lot to sort of unpack with each of these services.
I just note that Coach Manuel has a steady diet of Welch's fruit snacks, but he insists on variety. So he's got the red, he's got the green, he's got the yellow. So all food groups are covered, and he won the NCAA championship on that diet. So, okay, maybe a couple more questions. Yes, Barbara.
Hi, I'm a public health strategic planner and researcher. I'm curious to know, you talked about trust from the patient's perspective, and a little bit from the corporate perspective, but what about gaining the trust of the providers? How do they deal?
I mean, it is key, actually. So again, I mentioned our providers. Our providers with Nadia Care is not physician-centered, right? It's not physician-centric. But we do work with the OBs and their offices. The key factor we engage in, or the key issue we engage in with them, is trust. We actually need them to trust what we are doing. So this is an OB-developed model. It's the nurse-patient-family partnership model, which was actually approved in gerontology, but also pediatrics, and we brought it to maternal health. If you want to irritate a doctor, an OB in particular, call them and say, I'm Dr. So-and-so or nurse practitioner so-and-so, and I've prescribed this medicine, and because your patient said that they're having this, you've lost them in I'm Dr. So-and-so, let alone something you're doing with their patients that they don't know about, especially during this very critical episode of prenatal and postnatal care. So that and I call it abrasion because it's a break, and you have to then sort of mend it, and what's the balm? It's the trust. Do they understand what you are doing? Are you adding to their clinical care that they're delivering? Are you doing something for the patient population that they themselves are never going to be resourced to do, and don't have the bandwidth, and certainly don't have the staff? And that's where you start to think about being a value add to the provider, but in regular and constant communication, not just person to person, but we want them to see our data. So that's where the technology and the AI and all of the things we've been talking about, having them be plugged in enough to see exactly what we are doing. It is critical to have provider and physician trust in a lot of the work we do.
So I think this is a great question. I agree with what Adaeze said. I see a huge difference between trying to retrofit AI into conventional medical practice and bringing physicians into a kind of an AI native practice environment. And so we have an investment in a very interesting kind of AI forward insurance company called Devoted Health that also has its own clinicians. So it's a full medical model, kind of like what Kaiser does in California. And the physicians are dying to get into this environment because it has so much support from an intellectual, clinical, and administrative perspective that the clinicians can spend their time practicing medicine and not have to worry about everything else. But yet, when you try to bring AI technologies, and we've seen with other portfolio companies, into a conventional practice, it's a burden. So I do think that ultimately AI will drive big changes in how medicine is practiced in the United States, and probably drive towards more organized environments that are coming up de novo as opposed to modernizing existing practices.
Okay, last question. Who has a good one?
Thanks, everybody. Fascinating. We're here in DC.
And your name is, just introduce.
Karan Martinez, Business Communications and Professionalism Professor, daughter of an anesthesiologist and an ICU nurse for 35 years. We're here in DC. Our students choose DC because it's the seat of government. Paul, you mentioned the importance of having a policy background, and you have that as well. Talk just a bit to close us out about what you would ideally see as the role of government, whether it's regulation, whether it's payment, whatever. Because many of our students will end up in government, and how can they help solve the issue that Dave opened up with, that this is broken?
Seems like the government's working pretty well to me.
So, thank you. It's a great question. I'll start with from the operator's perspective and turn it to the two professional policy people. I mean, we are looking for, believe it or not, even hard in this environment, predictability. We need policy that is going to give us clear rules of the road so we can invest financial and human capital and energy in what's already very tight margins in healthcare. But we want to do good, and we want to do well. And the difficulty is when reimbursement is unclear, when the rules of the road are unclear, and you have so many different constituents weighing in, physicians, medical societies, hospitals, pharma, it makes it very difficult to navigate. So I encourage anyone who is interested and I would encourage you to do it. Be part of the policy solutions to make it clearer, what the expectations are, including setting the bars high in terms of quality, access, and cost, but making it predictable so people can invest and operate behind it.
So everything Paul said, I will say I was just like them, the students, 20 years ago. Add 10 to that. But, it was, this is the place to be when you are interested in, frankly, healthcare, because I think it's hard to be interested in healthcare without a deep understanding of healthcare policy. So I recommend not just reading up on it or dabbling in it, I recommend doing it from any perspective. Then there's an innumerable number, agencies where you can go and get some experience. Understanding policy making from a regulator's perspective gives you a different understanding of what it means to react to it from an operator or an investor's perspective. I'm an operating partner at an investment firm, a private equity firm. The way I see regulatory impact on any of our businesses is often very different from the way my partners would see it. You can sort of read the tea leaves a little bit better. You understand the cadence of government. You understand how government thinks about or ranks risk from a payment perspective. And at the same time, I think if my partner, I tell them this, you should leave your private equity perch and go work, just go crunch numbers for some agency, because then you can understand how they think about risk and why they are worried about certain risks or questions from a national perspective. It is an invaluable experience for me, even though I'm not in government right now.
Every healthcare private equity firm, every healthcare venture capital firm has 2, 3, 4, 5 policy people in it. I mean, you cannot invest in healthcare without.
Dan and I and Tom Scully started that.
I know. I remember Tom Scully telling me everything I needed to do. You key plus, right? So it is another, again, your careers might take you in a lot of different places, but there is a need, and it's the same thing in energy. We have some friends and do some investing, and my son and I in energy, and same thing. It's a energy. The policy is crucial to the future of energy, just like for healthcare.
Well, we could ask questions forever. Fascinating topic, amazing expertise. Thank you all for lending us your time and your expertise.
Dave, thank you.
Dave, thank you.
And thanks to all of you for coming.